feel like if anyone needs to build like a yoga website, they need to talk to you. Hey guys, welcome to this video. This is Steven and I have with me a very special guest today, my good friend Dim. And Dim is a really cool dude who I've met since I've landed in Australia.
What's up, guys?
Say what's up to the people. So Dim is someone who's climbed up the corporate ladder really quickly. He's a very successful professional in what he does. And today he's going to share with you some cool tips on how you can nail an interview being a migrant in Australia, or even if you're here in Australia and if you want some general interview tips. Dim has experience in conducting interviews himself because he's been like a manager. I'll let Dim maybe introduce himself in a bit. So we're going to talk about interviews, how to nail an interview. We're going to talk about how to climb the corporate ladder as quick as Dim did, and maybe we'll also talk about a bit more about settling and life here in Australia.
Yeah,
right?
Cool.
So Dim, yeah, you want to quickly maybe introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a bit about your story and what you do and where you're from and like, yeah.
Cool, sounds good. Steve, thanks for having me. So guys, my name is Dim. I'm originally from Sri Lanka. I've been in the workforce for 7 years now. So I've grown up here since I was 2 years old. Went to high school and university here. I entered Hewlett Packard, HP, in their business stream in the graduate program. That would have been about 7 years back, and I came up in project management. I spent 4 years at Hewlett Packard, and then I moved to public sector, which is the government, the New South Wales government, where I was contracting as a project management consultant for 2 years in business transformations within the public sector. Then I got hired by a Big Four consultancy. I won't say the name, but it's a very famous one. So think the Ernst & Young, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, one of those four. I work for one of them currently, and I'm a project management consultancy, currently doing large-scale business transformation. So I work with CIOs and CFOs of some of the biggest companies in Australia, and I'm very much under 30. Yeah. I get to do that kind of work.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. It's interesting to see how you were able to progress in such a short time and get into roles that really where you need to be at a peak performance, right? You also have experience in being like a manager and working with a team, right? And you've
Absolutely.
taken interviews and you've like had to select people for roles, right? So maybe you can share some information to people who are moving here for the first time on how to nail an interview,
yeah.
or maybe some tips for people who are moving into the country for the first time, like how do they nail an interview in Australia, or is there anything unique to Australia when it comes to having an interview?
Oh, look, absolutely. I have interviewed many people, a lot of them for IT types of roles or accounting types of roles or finance types of roles, where I've hired them into my team, whether as junior project managers or as technical SMEs, or maybe they would be some kind of accounting or finance profession as junior members of my team, maybe even business analysts. In terms of the advice I'd give, there's a couple of different areas. The first one is, there are some more basic ones, and then there's some more, I would say, deeper level ones. So in terms of the basic ones, the most basic thing that you need to know is you need to come from the frame of someone who understands what the manager or the hiring person is after. So don't make it too much about yourself. Instead, think about what is the person who's trying to hire, what are they trying to do? So for example, let's say that you are a business analyst and you're coming into a project. So this is a real life example of someone I had to hire. I had to hire a business analyst who was going to take care of a financial project. When we were doing that interview, what I was looking for was someone who had a financial background, but also had business acumen. I needed to know that they could understand how to liaise with the complexity of the stakeholder environment, and I needed to know that they could work fairly independently, but I also needed to know that they understood enough about the content, about their SME knowledge to actually add value to the business. So that's the frame of mind that I was coming from. So in terms of the people that I interviewed, the ones that actually made it through to the first round and all to the final round were the people who were able to understand where I was coming from. And that's what I would say to you as a candidate. Understand where the person who is actually doing the hiring, what are they trying to do? what is the role that they're trying to hire? What are their problems? So for example, you can even ask questions in the interview to understand. If you don't know what their problems really are, you can ask questions to understand what their problems are. So you can say, well, what kind of challenges are you facing in this environment? Is our stakeholders are a big thing? And you can do the research beforehand to figure out, if it's stakeholders that are a big problem, you can use examples in your questions to talk about how you're very good at stakeholder management, for example. So the key principle I want you to take in this first lesson is, where is the hiring manager coming from? And how can you understand that? What are the questions that you can ask from whatever source you like to understand where the hiring manager is coming from, so you can answer your questions better to show that you care about where the hiring manager is coming from and you can actually add value to the business. So I would say that's the first one. Does that
makes sense? Yeah, so that's like a general thing that anyone needs to keep in mind when going for an interview, right? Understand the problems that the hiring manager or the person or the organization is facing, and like work to solve that, and present yourself in the best possible light to be the person who's a right fit for that role, right?
That's right.
So that's something I'm sure a lot of people would find useful. Are there any other things that you look for when you are hiring a person, or did you distinguish between like a migrant who was coming into the country for the first time or a person who's been living in Australia for a while? Was that a factor for you personally while hiring, and what was the way that you looked at it as a person hiring?
Absolutely. So absolutely, especially if you were a migrant coming into the actual role, the things, particularly in that environment, that I needed someone who actually could handle their own amongst difficult stakeholders. So for that, I looked for how clearly and succinctly do they communicate. Do they have a heavy accent? If they have a heavy accent, it's probably too hard. Like, just because if I'm having trouble understanding them, how is anyone else going to understand them, especially in a fast environment? So one would be, if they have a heavy accent, they needed to be able to be understandable. That was one thing. Two, I needed to know that they had the strong subject matter expertise that I needed them in the role for. Three, I needed to know that they could operate well in a team, because it's typically a team environment. So how do they interact in a team? Are they good at communicating? I think communication is one of the biggest things, and that's something we can unpack a bit later if you want to.
Yeah, and is this related to the whole like cultural fit that people talk about for certain positions? You want to come a bit?
No problem.
Is it like
problem.
the same concept as people being like a cultural fit when they talk about people moving here for the first time? Like, I guess that depends on role to role, right? So say for example, if someone's a computer programmer, and that's a role that probably doesn't require you to be doesn't require you to communicate as much as maybe like a business analyst, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So I guess it depends on role to role as well. Would you agree with that?
I would say it does vary from role to role as to how much social calibration they need.
Yeah.
However, there is something that you can't deny, which is that you are working in a team.
Yeah.
And I need to know that I can understand you, and that we understand each other, that you understand the requirements that I'm giving you, and that you will let me know if you don't understand. So there's still an element of, it's okay.
Yeah, so if you're wondering why you're laughing, there was like a person who was just staring at us behind the camera.
Yeah.
So
when you're filming in public, it's always like this,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, it's always like this. Yeah, you were saying before we got cut off.
So it's really about two things, right? Can I trust this person? Do we understand each other? And also, do I know that this person actually can do the job that I need them to do? So those are probably the core things, right? You know, whether it's like a programmer or a business analyst, at the end of the day, do they have the core knowledge required to do the job? In most cases they do, right? People are very well educated.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because people are desperate, they sometimes try to force themselves into a role and pretend that they can do the role when I don't know if they really can. So I need to actually know that they can actually do the job. And the second part is, can we understand each other? And can we understand each other is a big thing that you can unpack if you choose to. So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, or what I'm sensing just from talking with you and talking with other people, there's like different levels when it comes to your ability to communicate. So if you're probably in like an IT role, you still need to have like certain level of communication to talk to people and communicate your thoughts effectively, right? But when you get to like some other positions, maybe like a business analyst, where it's more there's more emphasis on communication.
Yes.
And maybe if you take it up a step even further, if you're like in a sales role where you're like out there talking
Absolutely.
to people, then you really need to be good at like communicating, and that's where having like good English and being able rapport with people
Yep.
and the connection, having good social skills comes into play.
Yep.
So definitely think about the occupation that you're in or the role that you are applying for an interview for, and make sure that you're appropriately skilled in terms of being able to present yourself in the best manner, and that's something that you can work upon. Maybe there might be a link to resources in the description if you need help with those things. But again, coming back to interview, you were talking about what are some of the mistakes that people make in interviews, especially people who are moving here for the first time, and if you've taken any interviews, what are some things that you feel, oh man, I can't work with this guy because he's done something, or what are some of the things that people do wrong?
I would say one of them is untrustworthiness. So for example, especially if the person I can sense is kind of new to the country, then I'm going to be careful to know, do I actually trust this person to hire, like to actually, can they actually do this job? Because maybe out of desperation, they're just trying to find any job, right? So I need to actually know that I could trust them to do this job. So one thing I find people doing is they're not answering the question enough, and they're too focused on them. That's one of the biggest mistakes. So for example, if I say, tell us a bit about yourself, that's a nice open-ended question, and you can give, your executive summary of your resume there. But if my question is, can you give me an example of when you had to take a complex business requirement from 3 different stakeholders and distill it into a way that one business stakeholder could understand, can you give me an example of that? If they answer on some other random topic, it makes me lose trust in them straight away. What I would rather they do is just say, look, I don't have that exact example, but what I do have is an example of where for example, I do have a case where I had to, from a case study, I had to gather a lot of business intelligence, and I had to create a set of business criteria based on it and present it to a team. Will that help still answer your question or what you're after in the question? So they don't lie to me. Instead, they're being honest about who they are and about their experiences, but they're still looking to add value. So I think that was a big one. Don't lie and say yes, you can do it, or don't lie and pretend that you've done something that you haven't. Instead, draw from your genuine experience and still look to answer my question, because ultimately that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who can take from what they've actually done and add value to my business. They don't necessarily have to answer my question. I'd rather they be honest.
All right. And just a follow-up question on the whole interview process, like let's take a role that you are hiring, which is like a business analyst.
Yeah.
Like what percentage of like different attributes were you looking in a person for that role? So what percentage of like technical skills, what percentage of like communication, his or her ability to communicate, and what percentage was it like cultural fit or being able to like integrate into the team? Like how would you like break that down just for people to like prioritize it?
Absolutely. So look, in terms of it does vary from company to company. Like some companies will have a higher sense of cultural fit than other places. I think overall though, the top priority is communication skills. So if I think you said
for your specific role, right? For the business analyst.
I would say across the board in every single job I've tried to hire, communication skills have to be the highest point. Why? Because you need to know that you can work together with this person and this person can understand you. In terms of priorities, I think you said communication skills, you said cultural fit, and you said the actual acumen in the role. Was that what you were saying?
I said like technical abilities, cultural fit, and communication skills.
Yeah. So look, I think between technical abilities and cultural fit, those two can kind of get interchanged, because sometimes people feel if you have the right attitude, they can teach you the technical abilities, So whereas in other places they're just like, dude, we just need someone who's going to program. We need to be able to trust them to program. But at the end of the day, you still need to be able to trust them. And that's why I would say communication skills come to it first.
And I guess even like you might get into the role if you're like a programmer who can't communicate, but for you to like climb the ladder and move on to like bigger positions, you definitely need to have like communication skills and need to present yourself in the best manner, right?
Yeah. And here's a good little tweak with that, right? With the programmer example. Let's say your communication skills aren't super strong, but you have fantastic technical ability. I would say in that case, instead of me giving you a requirement and you just saying yes, I can do that. What a really good technique is reiterating my need back to me in my words or different words to communicate to me that we understand each other. So does that make sense?
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so let's say for example I say, look, what I need to do is I need to create this website, and this website's going to have some images along this side, and I want it to be like a yoga theme, and then maybe at the bottom it's going to have a click through button, right? And then if you say yes, I can do it, until I trust you, anyone can say that, right?
Yeah.
But if you say, yes, sir, like what I know how to do, maybe I can get some really beautiful photography of people in like leggings, because that's your business, right? It's about yoga clothes. So maybe I can get them maybe in a nice studio, maybe with some sunlight, and that'll be the big backdrop. And then maybe there I can have a button. Do you have a particular color scheme in mind? Purple? No problem. So I'll come up with a few options for you for the button at the bottom. And can you see there, I've reiterated the requirement, maybe with a little bit of my own opinion there, but it's very clear that they understand the brief now.
I feel like if anyone needs to build like a yoga website, they need to talk to you.
but I think that technique will take you a long way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's a good, because you're also like reaffirming to the person. Yeah, when you're listening to the requirements being told back to you, like, yeah, that's exactly what I need. And in your mind, like, this guy could be a potential fit because he's understanding what I need.
That's what you want, man, at the end of the day, right? They need to be able to understand each other. And look, I think one of the best books on this area is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. If you've ever read that book, or if you haven't, definitely check that out. The best books in this kind of area of communication that I've ever found: How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Crucial Conversations.
Cool. We'll put links to that in the description as well for you guys. Cool, man. So you talked about the whole interview process and what people can do to like nail it. Is there anything else that comes to your mind, mistakes that people made, or tips for people to nail an interview before we move on to something else?
Sure. So
Yeah.
So in terms of nailing an interview, one is the first question is usually a deal, like a make or break. The first question is, tell us a bit about yourself, usually, right? So you need to have you have to have that one prepared. It has to be nice and succinct, and if you can, have it slightly biased towards how it's going to meet my business's needs, right? So a quick example is, let's say the business is an IT programmer. You can just say, look, so this is my background. I've studied here, and through all this time, I've been trying to become an IT programmer. I finished with this degree, and in this course, I actually created this, and this program, and I also won this award. Sorry.
So can you let maybe like that's awesome. I think that's really good, because that's a common question, right? Can we give an example of how you would do it, like for maybe a role in the past or the current role that you're in? If someone said, hey Dim, like tell me something about yourself, like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. So here's an example, right? As I said, I work for a Big Four consultancy now, and obviously it's a consultancy, and the role was a project management consultant. So when I was giving my elevator pitch, is what they call it, that 60-second rundown. My one would have been something like this. Look, so my name is Dim, and I studied at Sydney University. I studied in this degree in commerce, marketing, and management. And throughout the whole time, my skew has always been working with people, which is why I did a marketing piece as well as my management training. I also spent 4 years in the Australian Army, and that's where I learned a lot about leadership and management. After that, I came up in project management through 4 years at Hewlett Packard. And I think where I really brought more value into the role was, I think I'm naturally a people person. You know, I've actually been to 8 different high schools when I was growing up, so I've gotten used to making a lot of friends. So while I did develop some really fantastic project management disciplines through Hewlett-Packard, I always loved working with people and loved developing relationships with people. So after that, that's actually why I got accepted, why I got poached into becoming a contractor in consultancy over the last 2 years in public sector. And that's kind of why I'm approaching this job, because I found I'm a natural consultant cut, in that while I have very strong discipline of project management and delivery, I also love working with people, and I think those two together make you a really good consultant. So that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. So just like looking,
I made that on the spot. So yeah,
that was fucking awesome, dude. I would hire you, like,
my
on the spot.
man.
You're
Yeah,
hired, man. You're hired.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. So just looking at it from an outside perspective, you like presenting yourself and your accomplishments in the best possible light, and then I seen you transitioning it into the role and what was required for that particular role. So like, you're basically talking about your achievements, what you've done so far
in relation to that,
in relation to the role, and you're kind of like plugging that into the role as well.
Yeah.
So that's a good tip for you guys, because that's like a common question that's asked in almost all interviews. Tell me a bit about
it's the first question, right?
First question. Yeah, and if you can nail that, like, you're always going to stand a better chance compared to the others.
Yeah, and some really good side tips as well, right?
Yeah.
It's about like you know, like even in your body language, in the way you talk, in the tempo, in the way you present yourself. When you give a handshake, you like, especially in Australian culture, they hate sloppy handshakes.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
so handshake has to be firm,
yeah,
like
was
that.
Firm enough?
Like exactly like that.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be bone crushing, but the worst handshake is like this.
Like the where you don't like.
Yeah. No.
hold the
Yeah.
person's
Because
hand
it
from
is. But yeah, if you do it properly,
Yeah.
it's a notion of trust.
Yeah.
So you do it and you look them in the eye when you do it.
Yeah.
That's
and
that's
it's
big one.
like,
And smile.
yeah, smile. Yeah. And like in terms of the pressure, it's like what I try to do is like replicate what what the opposite person is doing.
That's exactly what
so
it
if he's
is.
like has a firm handshake, you like put it a bit firmer, and if
Yeah.
it's a bit loose, you like have it a bit loose.
Exactly. But it is mirroring.
Yeah, it's mirroring. Yeah, that's like a whole nother thing that we can
It
get
is,
into,
it
the whole
is.
body language and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I
Some
think
good
like
basic
we've got some good tips for people who are moving here and are going to be like having interviews with people. I'm sure this will help them.
I hope so.
Yeah, so thanks for that, man. Really appreciate it. Hey guys, so that was part 1 of my 3-part interview with Dim. In part 2, Dim goes over his secrets of how he climbed up the corporate ladder so quickly here in Australia, and he shares some practical tips about how you can do the same and get promoted in your workplace once you are here. We also talk about the Australian work culture and some useful things that you really should know if you plan on living or working out here in Australia. So click the link, there'll be a link somewhere out here, and I'll see you in the next video. See you soon.